As we move the panel, we're now going to premiere our short film called On Second Thought. And we would also like to ask the culture panel to please come forward. Dr. Ben Chavis, Shaka and Hope Balamani, Reverend Cedric Harmon, our moderator, and Jaziri X, who just drove in from Pittsburgh. Please join us up here in the front. As we planned for this summit, we had to face the fact that our young people, just as Dr. Bias said, the approach has to change. And they are not the types to sit around and listen to a lot of lectures and talks and all of that to go on. So we decided to form a production team and produce a short film. This short film was based on a true story that came out of Boston. Our member, Faye Morrison, who's here, sent us an article about a tragic situation that occurred. And we decided, well, we can just write a script from this. And another member out in California put together a treatment. I put on my script writing hat, a hat I didn't know I had, and kind of fleshed out some script items. So what we're going to show you now as we go into the culture panel, and I'm going to invite Shaka and Hope Balamani, you can use the microphone there on the table to just give a brief introduction about the film and your involvement with it. But this is our production team. Shaka and Hope Balamani of Harbor View Filmworks in Maryland. We're very proud of this team. They represent the best out of our young folks, what they can do. Some of the production staff were their daughters out serving the water and being on team, so it was just the kind of black family we're all working toward. So please, just a brief introduction, and then we'll get right into the movie.
All right, first we'd like to thank Black Women for Positive Change for taking the initiative to reach out to us, to give an opportunity to have a bridgeway where we could reach young people. As technology advances, we have to find new methods and new ways to reach our youth. And so by producing this film, this is one of the ways that we can get this on Facebook and Twitter and on the YouTube. So again, we commend them. I'd like to real quickly just ask all of our actors that are here if you could just stand up real quick. We just want to give you acknowledgement. Thank you for your participation in this film. We shot 2 days, 2 16-hour days, and it was a very fast shoot and a fast edit. So I'm very thankful for everyone that participated in the crew. And I'll allow Hope to say something before we move forward.
Again, we do thank you all for the opportunity to be able to produce and make such a film. The film will be available via a link, and we ask that each one of you please share this link with someone else and use this film as a tool, a teaching tool to spark transformation with youth. You know, we often depict what is going on, but there is no bridge to be able to create or initiate change. And we do hope that you utilize this as a tool to create change.
And now we're going to talk about changing the culture of violence in America. And we're very pleased to have the panel with us this afternoon. Our moderator originally was Bishop John Selders of Connecticut, who is a member of our Summit Council, and due to some personal issues in the family, he was unable to join us. So he has asked a representative to stand in for him. But just let me take a moment, and the Black Women for Positive Change have been moving around so much. There's some in the room now. Please stand up, let everyone see you. Bernie, Ruth, Faye, just stand up for a moment since you're in one place for a second. These are some of our representatives. We have some in the back. Okay, thank you. And you can all go to blackwomenforpositivechange.org and sign up if you're interested. Reverend Cedric Harmon is a native Midwesterner with Southern and New England influences, a surprised last child to older parents who shared with him the gift of experience and wisdom. He has his bachelor's in media management from Emerson College and has completed extensive graduate work at Wesley Seminary. Reverend Cedric's deep faith calls him to do the work of justice and equality. He's also known for writing and television appearances on human rights and social justice. He has served as pastor of a radically inclusive congregation in Washington, D.C., and he's co-director with Ann Thompson Cook of Many Voices. It's a new nonprofit creating a black church movement for gay and transgender justice. So we're pleased to have you with us, Reverend Cedric Harmon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
You've been sitting for a while, so I will invite you to just stand for just a moment and stretch. I try to hear God, indeed. All right, thank you very much. It's my honor to be with you and to be in this place. Dr. Braxton, my honor to be in the sanctuary. To the leaders of Black Women for Positive Change, thank you for the opportunity. And I am indeed not Bishop John Selders. I am Cedric Harmon. So I would just ask real briefly, if everyone whose life has been touched by violence in some way, just slip up your hand, please. I think that's everyone in the room. Generally, when we think about violence, we are thinking of violent crime. We're generally thinking of things like murder and rape and sexual assault and robbery and assault. But each of us have violent experiences that color and impact our lives. And so this session looks at the ways in which the entertainment industry has an impact on the violence, not just violent crime, but the violence in our lives. The film that you just saw had within it some of the things that we talked about in terms of violent crime, but also the internal conflict that the young man was having, and he responded violently. So, our panel. We have with us Dr. Ben Chavis. Now, most of you will know Dr. Chavis as a civil rights leader, as a member of the Wilmington 10, as the co-founder of the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, as the national director of the Million Man March, as a preacher of the gospel in the United Church of Christ, as the president of the Education Online Services Corporation. Dr. Chavis has and wears many hats. But most of all, he is what we would call a righteous brother. He stands and speaks when others refuse to, and we are honored to have him with us. We also have Jasiri X, a rapper, who will share with us. You may know of him from film, from television, from This Week with Jasiri X, from What If the Tea Party Was Black, some of his video work that went viral, from the hit song, A Song for Trayvon. Jasiri deals with rap culture. You may know him as a guest on BET Rap City, on the Michael Baisden Show, Free Speech TV, Left of Black, Russia Today. He has traveled and performed from New York to Berlin, Germany. And he will share with us perspectives on, again, entertainment and its influence on violence in our culture. And then we just saw the wonderful film that was created, which speaks to us. And so I will get out of the way and invite these panelists to share from their own experiences about the impact of entertainment on violence in our culture. Dr. Chavis, please, first.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank the organizers and the planners of the summit. I think it's very timely on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington that we have a summit on nonviolence. I think that this panel should address the question of culture, the question of how the earlier panel identified values, how do not only young people attain values, but how do all have values that we live by. I've been involved with hip-hop from the very beginning over the last 30 years. I was brought up in the civil rights movement, and I guess I recognized earlier that the civil rights generation actually gave birth to the hip-hop generation. I tell people in the church and in the mosque, be careful what you pray for because God will answer your prayers. We prayed some 40 years ago for a generation of young people to come into this world that would be articulate, that would be gifted, talented. In fact, we talk about young, gifted, and black. But we also prayed for a generation to be fearless, not to be intimidated by the powers that be, and to speak truth to power. And some, as Brother would probably say, spit truth to power, sometimes in the face of the powerful. And unfortunately, I would say that it's been somewhat of a generation gap, a communication gap between the old and the young that I don't think we can afford. 50 years ago, a lot of young people were in the march on Washington. In fact, if you look at the pictures, the majority of the people out there were young people, led by elders and led by brothers and sisters, led by preachers, led by caring parents. A lot of parents brought their children, but I also know a lot of young people brought their parents. Because in 1963, it was a sense of standing up, it was a sense of speaking out, and it was a sense of challenging the prevailing notion that we have to wait more for the powers that be to give us justice rather than to demand justice for ourselves. Such as today in 2013, there is no justification, there is no rationalization of violence in our community. It's interesting that sometimes people are oppressed, unfortunately, take on the tendencies of the oppression rather than to engage in the total liberation. One of the problems with partial liberation is that you assume that we're all free, and then we wind up doing some things to each other that the slave master used to do to us. And so the whole slave mentality, or even I would say slave master mentality, is not necessarily exclusively with slave masters. When Dr. Barbara Reynolds read the FBI statistics about how many people will die or be the victims of violence, and, of rape, of assault in a short, very short time period, you may recall prior to 1994, the Centers for Disease Control declared that young black males was an endangered species. And that is why the Million Man March was called. It was a great day, but it was only one day. Because on that day, when we had 1 million brothers, crime rate in the black community went to an all-time low. I remember when we were planning for the Million Man March, the United States Park Service, the Capitol Police, the DC Police even, they drew up John Doe warrants. They at least had 20,000 arrest warrants that they knew that of 1 million people, they would have to at least arrest 20,000 people. Not one person was arrested. And when we left, the mall was totally clean. Not one piece of paper on the mall. So if we can reduce crime in our community, in other words, if we can not do violence to one another one day, we ought to be able to do it every day. But it's the will. The reason why Bloods and Crips did not fight each other that day, it wasn't because it's just a false truce. They came knowing that we're not going to do the things that we normally do in our community. We stepped outside of what had become normal. And unfortunately, and I would say this about the March on Washington, we have great events, we have great moments in history, but we need movements that change the history. We have to make a distinction between a moment in history and a movement that changes the history. The March on Washington was a great milestone, a great moment in history, one of our greatest. The Million Man March was a moment in history, another one of our greatest. But between these milestones, between the statistics that Barbara alluded to, we need a consistent movement that's intergenerational, where the elders are not pointing at the youth, where the youth are not pointing at the elders, where we're not pointing at each other, but we're working together. Participatory movement for change. And to me, the movie is a great example of how culture can be used to heighten awareness, to instill not just empathy, but to change the way people live. I'm hoping that this will be distributed, because part of the problem is, if you look at the entertainment industry, what gets distributed massively and what doesn't? What are the means of distribution of content like what we just saw? And I think that, and the brother asked a question about the nonprofit organizations that are here, how to get funding. That's a challenge. Our movement that changes history ought not to be broke. It's interesting that the Tea Party is rich. I'm not picking on the Tea Party. I'm trying to make a point that freedom is not free. And we have to build an institution and build organizations that can become self-sustainable in terms of how this church was built. The African Methodist Episcopal Church was built when small amounts of contributions were put together and sustained a denomination that was clearly proud of its heritage, not ashamed. It made a difference in this city as well as other churches. So I won't be long. I'm just saying that I want to thank you. I think this is a continuing discussion, Barbara. I'm concerned what's going to happen after the 50th anniversary of March on Washington.
Yes. Yes.
Are we going to wait 50 more years? What's the time interval? And of course, I'm raising a rhetorical question, but I'm trying to prior us to what was said, I think, earlier on the last panel, and Sister Bias mentioned it. We all, no matter what our age, no matter what our experience, no matter what our education, should commit ourselves, time, energy, and some of our resources to build a sustained movement that will not just bring down these terrible self-destructive violence in our community, but eliminate it totally. One death in our community, one act of violence is too much. And we have to have zero tolerance. Before we have zero tolerance in our attitude and the way we act, we have to have zero tolerance in our mind, what we accept in terms of it being acceptable. So God bless you, and thank you for this panel.
Jasiri, would you please speak? And then we would ask that Shaka remain available for questions so that we can keep with our time.
First, I want to thank the Black Women for Positive Change for reaching out to me. I'm honored to be sitting next to this brother right here who, I met, you probably don't remember, it had to be maybe 5 or 6 years ago when he came to Pittsburgh and spoke. And definitely was an inspiration to me, especially his work around hip-hop. It's so important to have something like this where our elders reach out to young people. If anybody wonder why I'm an artist that spits consciousness and speaks truth to power, it's because I have two mentors, both of who were artists but are known more for their activism. Those two men being the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and Harry Belafonte. I've been blessed to have direct mentorship by these two men. And when I first began working with Harry Belafonte around 2006, one of the first things he did was apologize to us and all of the young people in the room because he was saying that the generation before didn't pass down some of those things in terms of we know about Martin Luther King and I Have a Dream, we learn about that in school, but how the civil rights movement were able to do what they do. Martin Luther King was one person, but it was a lot of 16, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds, college students that left school. And so he brought those members of SNCC, members of the Black Panther Party, to talk to us about this is what worked, this is what didn't work. Here were some strategies that we can use to then go back to our communities and pass those on. So it's so important that we have that generational respect, but that, we pass those lessons on, because if we don't know, I always kind of say, sometimes I get frustrated with elders when it's kind of like, we're looking at this generation, like, what's wrong with y'all young people today, and why y'all acting like that, and y'all need to pull your pants up, what's wrong with y'all? And it's like, well, we didn't come out of the sky, like an alien ship didn't like come and just drop us off. We're a product of the generation before us. So if we don't know, then part of the responsibility is on the elder generation to teach us. Now, if you try to teach us, thank you. Now, if you reach out to us to try to teach us and we reject it, then that's on us, but that attempt has to be made. And I'll say one more thing about culture. I thought the movie was wonderful. One of the things that we do in Pittsburgh, we have an organization called One Hood, where we began to use hip-hop to bring our communities together. If you from the quote-unquote hood, a lot of times you have these beefs that you kind of just grow up into. This neighborhood don't like this community, this side don't like that side. But what we saw was, not only, even though we all suffer from the same joblessness, failing schools, the same conditions, instead of us kind of uniting and bettering our conditions, we tend to, in frustration, take it out on one another. But we all have hip-hop, and every neighborhood is somebody rapping or somebody got a record label. So we began to use hip-hop as a way to bring our communities together. And just recently, we started a media academy for young black men ages 14 through 19 in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh did a study of how young black men were portrayed in the media. What they found, that 86% of the time that the media talked about young black men, it was crime. 96% of the time it was crime or sports. And so we saw that there is, if we want to portray ourselves, and when you mentioned distribution about the movie, well, now we got distribution, we got Facebook, we got Twitter, we got YouTube. Like, we can determine as a community that this is a film that people should see, and we could all share it, we could all tweet it, we could all Facebook, and we can make this go viral. So I say that to say that when, part of the reason we see ourselves in a certain way is because how we are portrayed by mainstream media and major corporations. What happens is when you're looking at mainstream media, this is my own personal theory, what you're actually looking at is the eyes through old white men. Because old white men run mainstream media and run corporations. And so this is why not only just young black people, but any other group, women, everybody gets marginalized. And so what happens is you begin to see certain images that these people in power feel comfortable with. So they've told me, I've been told by major labels that we don't know how to market you. Because I'm a young, intelligent person, I want to talk about social justice issue. I can't see an incident like Trayvon and I have a microphone and not speak on this. How can I do that? I have to say something. Thank you. But the industry will say, well, that's not marketable. But if I was talking about drugs, if I was talking about killing my brothers and sisters, if I was talking about, making it rain in the club or somebody twerking, then now that's something that they want to put multi-million-dollar budgets behind and put it on BET, and you hear it on the radio. You like when I was talking about twerking? It's a dance. If you don't, I wouldn't tell you to look it up if you don't know what it is. But so the importance of our communities is, and the beautiful thing is, if it wasn't for the internet, today, what happens now is we have more power. Trayvon became a national story because really it was really black people on Twitter, and if you don't know social media, Twitter is really run by black women. This is why a TV show like Scandal is so big, and you're going to see more TV shows around black women because black women made that a destination TV show watching experience. And so we made Trayvon go viral. We basically tweeted about it to where now the mainstream media had to show up and had to cover something like that. So we can do it for issues that's happening in our community, and we could do it for artists or people that culturally are making music that we feel properly represents us and our community. So I always say, if you see young people, those young people doing something positive, speaking truth to power when it comes to their lyrics and stuff, and even if you don't necessarily understand everything we say, support those young people, because if our community, the industry's not going to put millions of dollars behind us for our own salvation. They've already determined that. And the last thing I would say, if you have not seen, because that movie short reminded me of a movie that's out right now called Fruitvale Station. If you have not seen Fruitvale Station, I felt, to me, it was the most humane portrayal of a young black man I've ever seen on the movie screen. It breaks down how a lot of times police brutality happens in our community, and how as young black men, a lot of times our lives are just disposable. So I would just encourage us to support that film and support artists that are speaking truth in our community. And thank y'all for having me once again.
So Shaka and Hope, I'm going to direct a question to you to respond to in the interest of time. And the question is not just to you, but it's for the consideration of everyone in the room. We know that the gospel tells us that blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. We know that there are pockets of violence that are based in neighborhoods, not just a blanket statement of urban areas. There can be neighborhoods in suburbs and urbs that are violent. So the question is, what can be done to change the culture of violence? Hope and Shaka, would you respond?
Sure. I think that, again, it has to be a joint effort, one, and we have to meet our youth where they are. So, like we just talked about, the internet, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the Instagrams, we have to create our own movement that counteracts whatever is being fed through the mainstream media. And we need support. It's not just about the funding, but it's about events like this, where you can get young people to come out that don't have to be paid to sit on a panel, but just want the opportunity to have a voice. And as long as you continue to use the platforms that the elderly have, or our elders have earned, to create a bridge for young people to be able to come up and speak until we can have these platforms ourselves. I think that that would be key.
I also think a big thing that I wanted to discuss with the consideration of culture is accountability. So we all have to be, first, accountable to ourselves, second, accountable to our children and our community, and third, accountable to Christ himself, to be a reflection, as we were talking about Dr. Martin Luther King, to be a reflection. And then there's a special piece that we haven't discussed today, which is also behavioral and mental health within our community. I'm here to personally encourage us as individuals, and then also for the family, not just wait on family services, but utilize timing to be able to have discussion groups and evaluate the mental health. Earlier, Ms. King was referring to root cause analysis, and I'm naturally a strategic analyst. But I look at this culture shift now, and we have to get back to the root cause analysis. Currently, a lot of the violence are effects or impacts, but there has to be something that needs to be strengthened in our home and strengthened in us as individuals to even simply have the courage to say no, to simply have the courage to turn the other cheek, to simply have the courage to say good morning to one another. When we're discussing culture, we have to also look within ourselves as not just youth, but let's start looking at it from an overarching perspective of community. Thank you.
Do you have any time for questions? No. We'll take two questions if you will make your way to the microphone rapidly, or, Reverend Reynolds, and then I saw a hand back there, gentlemen. Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to to thank you, young man, for being here and helping us understand and help us try to get this thing straight. Dr. Chafe is coming from Florida on a train and all this distance. But here's my problem. I can't embrace hip hop because I can't stand to be called the B word and the H word. I'm driving down the street, listening to my gospel songs, and here comes somebody blasting this filth out into the street. Now, this is my generation perhaps, but I can't get with it until they change. And I don't know, I don't think we taught the young people how to walk around with their pants hanging down. And I think that we need to take responsibility for what we do, but I thought in my community we had men who would stand up and say, you don't play this kind of junk in front of my daughter. So there's a gulf here, and how do we get past it? Because hip-hop music to me is disrespectful. And I know you're trying to do something about it, but it's still too much of it. Why can't the leaders stand up and say, stop playing this music?
Okay.
Oh, no, I thank you for your question. It's a very valid question. And I would say the leaders, and this is, to me, I think what happens is we give the artists too much power. The artists really are, in a sense, employees. The leaders are the people that run these record corporations. And a lot of times we go at the artists, and you'll hear stories. It was an artist named Too Short. And for those that know Too Short's music, Too Short was basically known for saying the B word. Like, that's what he was known for. But Too Short wanted to do a conscious record, and he went to his, he was on Jive Records at the time, and he said, well, I want to do a conscious album. And they said, well, okay, well, why don't you do an album that's real filthy? And if you do this album that's real filthy, we'll let you do the conscious album. And so he did that, and when it came time to do the conscious album, they didn't have time to do that album. So a lot of times, it is how it is. And when you meet a lot of these artists on a personal level, we just saw, for those, Snoop Dogg just changed his name to Snoop Lion and put out a song called No Guns Allowed. And was in response to the violence in our community, has his daughter on the song. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. But he's in a position where he can do that. A lot of times these artists really want to say more. They want to tackle these issues, but they're in a position where the people that run those labels will silence that or want them to project a very negative thing. But that conversation that you said has to take place. And I don't think there's anything wrong if you see a young person being disrespectful. Because like you said, what we did in Pittsburgh, we had that situation, and I'll close up and pass it to my brother. We had 6 shootings in a 21-hour period in a community in Pittsburgh called Homewood. And so what we did was, instead of calling a press conference, we took about 30 to 40 brothers and we started just walking the streets at night. And what we noticed was every time that we did that, we didn't have the violence in our community when we were out there. And so, and we were approaching the young brothers on the corner, but we didn't approach them in a negative way. We approached them to say, we just wanted to say we love you. We care about you. So, when you approach those young people, which is your right as elders, I would just say approach them with love. Approach them and let them know, I love you, and I'm saying this to you because I care about you, I love you, and I want to see you live. And I want to see you do better. And if you come, I don't care how hard that young person is, if you come to them with that love, they will listen to you, and they will follow you and follow your instructions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I think it was an excellent question. I thank my brother for his response. I just want to give you a couple food for thought. The N word, the B word, and other derogatory words were not created by hip-hop. I learned how to curse when I was 5 years old because I heard some older people cursing. I disagree with this notion that young black men are wearing their pants down because it's prison culture. If that was the case, we've been wearing our pants down long because we've always been in prison disproportionately. Sometimes we try to get a simplistic answer to a complex question. You asked a complex question. And part of the complexity of the answer is not to justify the wrong. I believe it is wrong to call a sister a B, or any woman a B. But we have to be aware and honest with one another that that word is used in a lot of our homes, among women and among men. And young people did not invent that word. That may be a hard pill for us to swallow. But if we're talking about accountability and we're talking about truthfulness, we not only have to spit truth to power, we've got to spit truth to ourselves. Language is a reflection of the social condition of the people. The social condition is not a reflection of the language. I wish that the profanity of poverty, that the profanity of what happened to Trayvon Martin would arouse our consciousness as much as the profanity of the B word and of the N word. It's not to choose, but I think if we have a principle of consciousness, I agree with my brother. There used to be a time in hip hop said, well, that's a conscious rapper. Oh no, that's just an unconscious rapper. It's not true. There's no such thing as an unconscious rapper. They're just conscious about different things. Okay. Some rappers are conscious about the strip club, and that's why they rap about that.
Thank you, Dr. Chavis. Let me get the last question, and then we will.
Okay, but I just wanted to explain that it is a great question that requires a lot of dialogue within the family, intergenerational dialogue, where we don't point fingers and get judgment at one another, but try to understand the phenomena that's going on in our community. Hip-hop is no longer now an American phenomenon. It's global. Young people all over the world. And everybody don't speak English. In fact, English is a minority language in the world, but yet how is this culture growing among young people? And I think we have to analyze what do young people desire, want, demand, not only here in America, but throughout the world. The world is changing, and how technology, the internet, interplays and allows young people to communicate, sometimes using code language. We hear young people saying one thing, we may think we understand what they're saying, but believe me, they have a whole nother sub-understanding of how they communicate, what they communicate. That's all not only reflected in the dress, but also what they call the swagger, how they move in life.
We're moving to our next session. Thank you for the opportunity to serve as your moderator. As you can see, the conversation requires much more time. Thank you.